Hi, I'm Teresa Kanan with Stitch and Tree, and today we're working on the North to Alaska quilt. Mine's not completely quilted, it's only partially quilted, so it's a little rough around the edges, but I thought today I'd show you how we make our fish using a very simple flying geese method that doesn't involve cutting triangles or quarter square triangles, and our fish tails. So won't you join me as I show you these two methods? Page 4 of your pre-cruise cutting and piecing instructions tell you exactly how many fish you need of fish 1 fabric, fish 2 fabric, and fish 3 fabric. Remember, for each fish, you'll need 2 squares as indicated on your cutting chart. So fish 1, there'll be 16 fish. So that means you'll cut 32 squares for the head and the body of the fish. And you'll also have to cut 32 squares for the tail of the fish. For each fish, you're going to need a fish body and a fish tail. You'll need the 2.5 by 4.5 inch piece for the fish body and a 1.5 by 2.5 inch piece for the fish tail. And you'll need 2 1.5 inch squares for each. The squares will be stitching in either corner, so we'll need to mark using a pencil or press using an iron into a half square unit. Let me demonstrate. I can easily mark the diagonal line that I'll be stitching on using a chalk pencil or a regular pencil on the wrong side of the fabric. And I can see that line quite easily. Or the method that I prefer is to take that square unit, finger it, press it in half diagonally, and then set the iron on it. With the wrong side facing the inside, when I set the iron on it, I have pressed the diagonal line that I need for stitching, and it works out great because I'm going to end up pressing those out anyway. So I'll need to press that anyhow. That way I don't have to take the time to mark each of the diagonals. The other thing I like about pressing the diagonal on the square is it will indicate to me if there is a problem with the square. If I did not cut it exactly 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch, then it will show an overlap here. That happens to be a good example. I'll see if I can find one that's not. You can see here on this example, I'm off just I'll call it a skosh, a 1/16 or a 32nd of an inch. But sometimes my squares could be quite a bit more off if I'm not paying attention as I'm cutting. When you press the square in half diagonally, it'll give you a true indication whether or not you have a perfect triangle there. To sew the seam, you will place the square on the right-hand side of the fish tail or the fish head, whichever you're working on, and stitch it diagonally from the top of the diagonal to the outside, top center to the outside. Then you bring it back and cut. I'll show you how. Place the square on the right side of the fish tail and stitch diagonally from the center of the fish tail to the outside of the fish tail. I'm using an open-toed foot, not my 1/4 inch foot, so that I can sew directly on the line without catching that extra fabric. You can change these fishtails quite easily. This is my fishtail, and I have my square of water stitched in place diagonally. I'm going to take a ruler that has a nice 1/4 inch line that I can see well, place the line for the 1/4 inch directly over top the seam, and then trim the unit 1/4 inch outside the seam. Once you've trimmed that unit, you'll press it to the outside. I use an iron to set that seam in place, finger press it over, and then hold it in place with my iron for a count of 5 seconds, or 5 Alaskas. Once that seam is set in place, I'm ready place the other square on and stitch diagonally along the line that I've marked or that I have pressed. The second square will slightly overlap that first piece, which is exactly what we need to do in order to get our flying geese. Once again, I place my ruler with the 1/4 inch line directly over that seam. Use my rotary cutter to cut 1/4 inch outside of that seam, and then I will press that over as well. I'll set the seam by placing the iron on top of it. Finger press it first and then place the iron on for 5 seconds. I can use my ruler to trim the unit up so that it measures exactly 1.5 inch by 2.5 inch. And that's a fishtail. And that's how we make the fish body and the fishtail. You can tuck these into your bag with your fish number fabric and bring them along with you on the ship, and we'll be ready to put them together into the quilt.